Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. This evening, we have one of our favorite guests on. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. She is our forensically, organizationally, and clinically trained psychologist. She is the president and co-founder of AMA and Associates. She is the president and founder of Celeste Productions, Inc., the immediate past president of the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation Board. She is currently a trustee of the Michigan Health Council. She is also an author and musician, and she is here tonight to talk about accepting ourselves and why it is so hard to be authentic. Good evening, Dr. Angie. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I am very well. Good evening, Kim. It's great to be here.
It is always great to sit before you. All right, so let's get to our first question. Thank you for being on. So it's election season, and I'm looking at people who I'm like, who are you? What are you running for? What's happening? And I know that when candidates come out and talk to us, they're trying to sell us an image. And it got me thinking, when we're out in our daily lives, that's exactly what we do. We try to sell people images based on whatever, whether it's something socially acceptable, we want to be popular, we want to be like someone, or we want to fit in. And I'm going to say, quote unquote, fit in. Dr. Angie, why is it so hard for people to just be themselves?
That's an excellent question. And there are so many layers, I would say, to the answer or the answers. Very much depends on who the person is and that person's background. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of people, the reason it's hard to be authentic for them or themselves, as you put it, in the quotations, is for a lot of people, it comes down to a couple of different reasons. One category of reasons has to do with history, their own history. Another category has to do with how well they know themselves, and both of those deal with self-esteem issues. So, like I said, it's not the same for every person. There are many reasons for this, but just taking those two categories to start with, because a lot of folks do fall into one or both of those. Mm-hmm. So starting with the category of, and this is in no particular order, but the category of history and personal experiences. Everything from, or anything from, things that people are taught when they're growing up. So let's just start with developmental history, from the time that we are born and the homes and families that we grew up in. All of those things and the people around us give us messages about who we are, mm-hmm. and our acceptability, like how acceptable we are. So there are a lot of psychologists and a lot of psychological theories. Some of the most famous ones are Jean Piaget. He talked about our cognitive development from the time that we're little ones. And as our cognitive, meaning our ability to think and reason and the things that we understand. And as our bodies and brains grow and develop, we are better able to grasp and understand the things around us. So for a lot of his theory, he looks at brain development and how that and our experiences around us as far as being raised, but more so just the way the brain develops, and looks at how that tells us things about who we are. Whereas you have, so many people have heard of the name Sigmund Freud. You have Freud, mm-hmm. another famous theorist, mm-hmm. in the field of psychology, and he looks at the biological development and also looks at our experiences as far as the way we're raised, the way those who raise us and our caregivers and our parents, the way that they interact with us at different stages. So depending on how those who are around us growing up, depending on how they react to us at different stages as we grow, biologically grow up, those, again, they give us messages, they give us signals about our worth, how acceptable we are, et cetera. So that's just two, but there are so many different others. There's Vygotsky. He looks at the culture around you that you grew up in, but mm-hmm. there are many others also. But these different theories, these different psychologists look at that very question that you asked, why do we think the way we do? Why do we behave the way we do? And then different theorists come up with some different reasons why, based upon what they've learned about the human dynamic. So your question about why is it so hard to be authentic? If you were raised and your history and background was being around a family that was constantly maybe putting you down or giving you signals that what you were doing is not good enough, or you are not worth loving, or that somehow there was always it's always your fault, or always the things that go wrong around the family or siblings, it's lands on you. Over time, that gives us a picture of who we are, and we begin to, even if we don't realize it, we begin to start defining ourselves based on those reactions. And it's the same thing on the more positive side. If you're always being, or regularly being, reinforced that you have strengths and you have positive things to give, and just being yourself is not only good enough, but that you are lovable just as you really are, in your true authentic self, for that person, then you're going to feel and think that, being who I really am, it's okay. And it's wonderful, because those are the signals that I got. So when it comes to adults walking around, and your question of why is it so hard for some people to be authentic and be who they are, for a lot of people, or for at least some parts of the population, it's because somewhere along the line, while growing up, over those years, where they're developing their view of themselves, they got the message, and it was, may have been reinforced at school or wherever, that if I am my true self, I'm going to be rejected. If I'm my real self, I'm going to be considered unlovable. If I'm my real self, I'm going to lose the relationships I have around me, meaning friends, loved ones, intimate partners, whomever. So this idea that of worth and being valued for who I am, if that's instilled, it's easier to be yourself. If the opposite is put in there, then a person may want to run away from being themselves, because their experiences or their history has told them, if I am myself, then I'm going to be rejected, or I'm not good enough. So that's a lot of the history, the background part, when I say it depends on their history. And also, in terms of history, it also can come about if you've had those experiences. Or there are people who really try to fit a format, like really try to fit in with what they think they're supposed to fit in with, or be the way that they're told that they should be, that's acceptable. And then when they find that maybe they are acceptable, and then when they decide, I'm going to be more of who I really am, and they find, maybe for their experience, those same people were like, I'm who is this person you're showing me? They're less thrilled with that face that you're showing them, meaning, being more yourself. So some of their history may be that they really were rejected and lost friends and things. So that's the history part of it that can help explain it for some. For other people, the other, like, big category, or it's another, main category, is it's this idea of, I mentioned kind of like what's taught is part of that. So taught does not always mean someone's saying it directly to you. Taught can also mean what you've seen around you. If we see other people being, like, for example, I'm scared to admit that I love, crocheting or knitting, or something that may be considered less cool by certain folks, especially when they're growing up, because I've seen so-and-so get beat up. So it's not always being told that. Sometimes it's just what you see around you, and then you become scared. There's a risk. You feel like there's a risk of being treated badly. And then I mentioned self-esteem also. Again, that is weaved throughout all of it. That even if you feel your true self might be rejected, oftentimes people who still feel that they I almost want to say that they feel strong enough
Mm-hmm.
to, show the world who they really are, even if they risk being, or they feel they risk being rejected. Um, a lot of times those are people whose sense of self-esteem is really high, or high enough to say, you know what, I accept myself, and that's good enough, even if other people reject me.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the reasons around it: self-esteem stuff, what you've been taught, what you've experienced, and fear,
Mm-hmm.
fear of being rejected.
Mm-hmm. And that's fascinating, because I want to say that in a microcosm of an example, we see it in school with kids,
Definitely.
especially high school. We see it sort of at an accelerated rate, where you have popular kids, you have nerdy kids, you have sort of the kids that don't really fit anywhere and just sort of fade into the background. And everybody seems to find their place and sort of survives.
Yeah.
And, I was a nerd in high school. And it's funny because I'm looking at popular culture, and popular culture says, oh, well, nerds are cool and nerds own the world. And, we've got Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all these different people who are quote unquote popular nerds. Yet you still hear people say, I'm not a nerd. Don't call me a nerd. Don't
Yeah.
call me a nerd. I'm like, but I thought we were sort of past that. Dr. Angie, is there something negative that goes with the word nerd, or am I overthinking
You are definitely not overthinking it.
it?
And that whole idea, every generation has its terminology, every culture has its terminology, um, to describe a similar kind of person, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, so you're right that in recent times, the idea of being a geek or a nerd has like become the cool thing, more so.
mm-hmm.
But that's kind of relatively recent, I would say, as far as our
Yes.
broad history, is
Mm-hmm,
concerned.
mm-hmm,
Um, when we think of the stereotype of a nerd or a geek, I consider myself geeky and nerdy because, I like to sit down and look up, really cool studies and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. You like to read all that stuff. Which are cool things. They're wonderfully cool things. But so the stereotype of a nerd is not just the bookishness, like
mm-hmm,
loving to read and doing. Oftentimes, it's more solitary. Not
mm-hmm,
always, being more solitary. Like I said, crocheting or sewing or reading and things like that. But what goes hand in hand with that is this idea of being not the center of all the social activity. That kind of goes hand in hand with that, growing up. So
yes.
the nerdy person, the geeky person is also, as far as the stereotype now, we're not saying this is, across the board or true for, every person, but the stereotype is awkward
Mm-hmm,
in general,
mm-hmm,
awkward around people,
mm-hmm,
not necessarily the best communicator, somebody who may have a hard time communicating or trip over their words, someone who's less coordinated. You can just like go down the list. Someone who is not the most fashionable. I mean, these are all the stereotypes of what
mm-hmm,
we, last several years call a geek or a nerd. And
mm-hmm.
those are things that, especially for adolescents and, junior high or high school, it's all about, not for every child, of course, but for many, that whole fitting in, being popular, being accepted, and not being considered rejected. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's not all in your mind. It's still, we still have those stereotypes out there. And the recent pushing back and saying, what, being a geek and being a nerd is a good thing, because it's so recent. I think that the longer history of looking at those definitions as a negative, or it's going to take some more time to kind of, stop using that as a put down,
Mm-hmm.
and recognize that, it takes all kinds, and we have popular geeks, and we have nerdy people who are good with words, and all of that in between. We have, everybody doesn't fit into that like neat little narrow
Yes.
category.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn that, hopefully, as we mature and as we grow, Some people never fully learn that, but you can be, and we have seen very glamorous, most popular models and singers, whatever, who are voracious. They love to read and do research, and
Hmm.
also, you know, uh, we can fit into all of those different categories,
Hmm.
and all of them have their strengths and their wonderfulness.
They do. They do. I was a bookworm in high school, as I tell my girlfriend, my best friend, we talk about it all the time. She said, "Yeah, Kim, I remember you in high school. You always had your head in a book." I said, "Sure did," because the world was scary and books were safe. So, I was awkward. I was painfully shy. I did not like the sound of my voice. So if I had to speak, I said what I needed to say and I shut up. And most of the time I didn't even really say what I needed to say. It was only if someone prompted me to say something, meaning I had to be forced to say something, then
Yeah.
I would say it. However, most of the time I didn't want to say anything and I would just, okay, whatever, and just, walk away from the situation. But, Dr. Angie, I think about today's time with social media. So I'm so thankful we didn't have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat and all
Oh,
that when
goodness.
I was growing up,
Yes.
because some folks would embarrass me. My mother, so when I was a kid. And it's funny because I love floor length dresses and skirts. But my mother was very conservative. And so I would always say, yeah, I dressed like Carrie when I was coming up. I had floor length dresses like to the floor. Like you saw my ankle. That was all you saw. My mother was like, a lady always wears a long skirt. She liked long skirts. So hence. And people would always say, you dress like an old lady. I'm like, I just the way my mother wanted me to dress. I don't have autonomy. Whereas other people, could go and buy the latest and greatest. It didn't work like that in my house.
Uh-huh.
And, because of that, people pick with you, people say things. And so me being painfully shy was just like, okay, just leave me alone. I was always the one ducking and dodging, running from different situations. But I think about kids today, we have social media and there are all these trends to do all these silly things, light yourself on fire. That
Oh,
was a
goodness.
real trend. And, they do all kinds of stuff. But I think about it and you think about Instagram models, what the ladies look like, and you have these young girls now who are coming up thinking, this is how I'm supposed to look, instead of embracing their own uniqueness. I am grateful that I didn't have to worry about that. I could focus in on what I liked about myself, and that was enough, and I was okay with that. But other people don't necessarily have that. And then if you're a guy, you got to be big and muscular and you got to have a
Right.
fancy card. Not that we didn't have to have a fancy card before that, but now
Right.
you got to be able to show it on social media and you got to be able to stunt with it. And if you can't, it's like, you ain't nobody. Nobody cares about you. Dr. Angie, how can we protect ourselves, especially our kids? Because we're going to all see it. We're all going to look at it.
Yeah.
But instead of participating in some of the dangerous behaviors and setting ourselves up for mental distress with a lot of it, because the studies have shown this, and I'm sure you know this, that issues with anxiety and depression increase when people
Yes.
get on social media.
Mhm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The studies have shown that and continue to show that. But I tell you, one of the things that really reaffirms for me, because I always tell people that
Go.
one of the things that really reaffirms for me the things that something I tell parents and I tell kids too. Kids seem to hear it more. Parents tend to be doubtful sometimes, but the thing that I tell them is, you have more influence over your kids than you think you do.
Mhm.
Even when they're their most rebellious state, the things that you say and the things that you model, it gets in there. It gets in there, and it may take some time, but they will. They may not say it where you can hear it, but they will like parrot back in their own circles the things that they've been taught at home, the things that they did at home, and I see it all the time. I've had young people, like high schoolers, even some rather mature junior high school folks. But I see sometimes it's really the more popular kids, but I've seen it with shyer kids as well, where they'll say, no, I don't, I don't participate in that because my mom says that a lady doesn't do blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what my mom said. Or my
Exactly.
mom said, yeah, exactly. Like, that's not what ladies do. Or I was taught to respect blah 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 blah. So and they'll actually, now I don't know how they act at home, but when they say these things, when I see teenagers say stuff like that, and then these aren't perfect kids by any stretch of the imagination, but when I hear them say that, I notice how they sit up or stand up a little higher, a little, and their shoulders are back. You can say they take pride in the way that their family is. Like, my family doesn't, doesn't do blah, blah, blah. And they feel good about it because the blah, blah, blah is not following, every trend that other, pardon me, I was trying to make sure that my internet's stable.
Very
But
good.
the blah, blah, blah is that they feel empowered by their moms or by their dads, uncles, whoever's talking to them, feel empowered. They can stand up and say, no, I would never smoke. No, because, I apologize. Okay, I'm putting my internet on.
Okay.
I apologize. Okay.
It's a little windy today.
It is. And I didn't realize that and that could have something to do with my phone. Well, okay, so the screen does not want to respond at this moment. Okay. Ways to protect ourselves. Like I was saying, I love it when I hear young people, teenagers talk about, with their friends, if someone's trying to pressure them to do something that they don't feel comfortable with. I hear young people say, oh no, I was taught not to do that, or my mom says. So even in 2022, even in this day and age, the things that we say consistently to our kids, the things that we model, because we know that like the majority of communication, something like 75, 80 to 85% of communication is what people see. And, the rest of it is what they hear, although what they hear is very important. So we can protect our kids by being consistent, and instilling in them high self-esteem values, to feel good about themselves, to build them up, to feel strong enough to stand their ground about things that they aren't comfortable with, so that they don't feel, to help them combat peer pressure, that's the important part. To sit down with them, that's important too. A lot of times kids don't necessarily want you to sit down with them, but sitting down with them and just having those discussions about their favorite, let them tell you about their favorite, music artists or basketball player, whomever it is that they're admiring. Ask them questions, try to get to understand and spend some time with them, excuse me, and finding out not just who they admire, but why. Finding out why they admire whom they admire can tell you a lot about where their mind and where their head is at, as far as what they think is, looks good, what's popular. And, so you always want to try as much as you can to stay on top with your kids about what's going on in their lives. And in learning that, you can help instill what they have that are wonderful strengths, because oftentimes young people will talk about who they admire, and they may say it in a way that has to do with what they feel they lack. So, I love the way she does blah blah. I could never have, or I don't have. And that's an opportunity to remind them about how beautiful they are, how smart, and all their gifts and talents. And again, they may or may not hear it in that moment, but it goes a long way to help protect them. Reminding them, letting them know about airbrushing, and that everyone, the way that they appear is not necessarily the way they look in real life. The beauty is still in the eye of the beholder, that what one person finds beautiful, another person doesn't. So you can help inoculate and protect them by reminding them to admire and to appreciate the things that they love in themselves. So all of those things are important. And for us adults, excuse me, similar kinds of things. I haven't said this in a while, but one of my favorite things to tell people is to look in the mirror, practice looking in the mirror and smiling at yourself. And go through the things that, I like my high forehead. I like my, whatever it is. To remind yourself that we all have, same thing we tell our kids, we all have those strengths. We all have those aspects of ourselves that are beautiful and that we should celebrate. And another thing too is we have choices in how we respond to things.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right when you say that research shows that, extra time on social media, especially a lot of the visuals out there can, make people feel depressed and anxious. But we can look at folks on social media, a couple of things I want to mention in terms of our choices. I tend to not have negative responses personally when I look at social media because I pick and choose at what I look at.
That's very important.
Very, very important. So for I just love the natural hair community, so I look at natural hair tutorials and what are they doing to skincare or different things, things that I can learn from, things that, I admire that. Well, let me look at how he's doing that or she's doing, exercise videos and stuff. So I choose my content, and we can teach our kids to do that, and we should do that ourselves. Choose your content. Choose things that you find positive. If you're finding yourself consistently, if you notice you're consistently feeling down after you look at certain things, then don't look at them. There have been some folks that I may have enjoyed looking at on YouTube, but after a while, I was like, you know what, I don't enjoy that anymore. I find so there are choices. And another thing too is if I'm looking at someone that's, they're accomplishing what I want, what I want to be able to accomplish, my mindset is, well, let me learn more about what they're doing and see how I might be able to incorporate some aspects into maybe my fitness or my, health journey or whatever it is. So all of those have to do with our choices about, what we look at. And we want to teach our kids the same thing. If you're constantly ingesting negative content, and that's on the internet, as they say, or just, what you look at in a magazine, then it can break down. So yeah, you can, it's how you use it. It's what you gravitate towards. I'll give you a last quick, perfect example of what's going on right this moment with the artist formerly known as Kanye West. It is important to know, and that's again to teach our kids too. It's important to know what's going on, but I don't have to ingest like every little bit of it. So I've heard a lot about what's going on with him, and he's being very anti-Semitic right now. Some have suggested maybe he's off whatever medications he might be taking. That could be the case. But whatever is going on with him, in terms of consuming news, I keep up with. I know that he's been doing this, and it's hurting his brand. I don't, I understand those people who are like Adidas who are pulling away from him. I totally understand that because you don't want to support that negative speech. While I see that stuff, I've consciously chosen, I have not clicked to go and find out what did he say. Sometimes you need to do that to be informed. I don't necessarily want to find out all the horrible things that he has said. So yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah, it's still informed, still know what's going on around you, but exercise your rights, exercise your and that's another thing to remind ourselves as well as our kids that we really do have a choice. Stuff that's put out there, it just pulls you in so strongly, and that's by not by accident. Really makes you want to click on more things that we have to remind ourselves that we do have choices. We do have choices, and just because have you seen everybody? It's like I don't have to look at everything.
Exactly.
So those things ourselves, I'd say too. Yeah.
And you're right, Dr. Angie. We do have a choice in what we digest, what we put into our bodies. We talk about eating healthy. We talk about thinking positively, but it's also what we engage in on social media. It's what we engage in on television. And I'll be very honest. Every time there is a police video that goes viral and, it is some horrific bad stuff, it took me a long time to watch George Floyd. I'm going to be really honest. I knew what happened because it had been described, but I didn't want to see the video. And I really didn't see it until I started watching the trial. And it was one of those things that it affected me. And I felt very saddened by it, which I had to work and do some things to bring myself back up. And I think that's very important, because oftentimes, we'll say, oh, I'm just going to go on social media for a little while. I need a break. Okay, well, what are you doing? I like to look at travel, because I make lists. I want to go here. I want to go there. I want to see this, or I've been here. Oh, look, I've never seen that. I got to go back. Whatever it is, those are the types of things. And I love dog videos. Any kind of funny dog video, dressing up.
Yeah, love the animals. Yeah.
Love the
Yeah.
animals. Those are always
Yeah.
funny. And you're right. We absolutely have a choice, and our kids have to learn that they have a choice, that you don't have to participate in it. We hear horrible things about kids taping each other, and then it gets released and it's viral. And then people say, oh, they were passing pornography. I'm like, they don't even know that that's what that is. It is that. Unfortunately, kids don't grasp that idea that you can't send naked photos or embarrassing videos, because they're going to be on the internet forever.
Right. Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. One very last question, Dr. Angie. If people are struggling and find themselves in a situation, is there something that you would say to them to help pep them up? Is there something that they should keep in their minds to remember? Just be who you are. Everybody's not going to accept you just because. They're just not. And we have to get to a certain point where we accept that. And for a lot of us, and I'll say even for myself, it has taken me a really long time to get to a point where I'm just like, they just don't like me. Okay, move on. There's on TikTok, there's a favorite video that I like to watch where different people will say, what happens when people talk about you behind your back? And the lady says, nothing. Keep moving on. Y'all still letting people upset you who don't pay your bills. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Why am I upset? Because I found out, I heard, I saw it, whatever. That's trivial. It doesn't matter. And I think for a lot of people, we get caught up, as you said, behavior, what you were taught, you were rejected, a lot of those different things. But Dr. Angie, give us one positive tip before we leave.
Oh my goodness. Only the one positive tip is, to develop the habit of positive self-talk, so that when you run into negative things, whether it's rejection, someone said something mean to you, because I have the most sensitive feelings on God's green earth. It's taken me a lifetime to develop. So I totally understand. But a daily habit and mental practice of God made me, he put his best when he put me together. None of us are perfect. We have our flaws, but I am loved and lovable. The positive things when we remind ourselves of our value and remind ourselves that everybody goes through pain. The most perfect looking being on the internet has gone through and is going through pain. So I think I would say one really good tip is to build up a daily habit of self-support and reminding ourselves of the positive things about ourselves, and that we are not made or broken by what other people say. If that's a habit, then when you run it, it's like an inoculate. It still might hurt a little bit. It still might take you aback. It still might take the wind out of your sails when you hear that or run into that. But you'll build better resilience to bounce back from it. You'll already have a habit in place to help begin to repair those emotional wounds, because you're already in the habit of saying these positive things to yourself. And it's not just positive, but when you say everyone has their flaws, everyone goes through pain, it's a reality check. So that's my one thing I think would be really, really good, is that daily habit of mental positive, putting your arms around yourself and being realistic about everyone having their good parts and their flaws. that you carry with you. I would say that can help you along your journey and to not it won't take you down. So these things don't take you down.
That is wonderful, Dr. Angie. Thank you so much for sharing that positive tip, because we have to work on our self-talk. I know I do. There is something I have to remind myself of. I am also super sensitive when people say stuff, and people will say, Kim, you don't seem super sensitive. I said, that's because y'all don't see it. I go someplace and cry like, they don't like me. What's wrong? You know, that kind of thing. But you're right. We've got to have that good self-talk, that positive self-talk, and strengthen ourselves and uplift ourselves. Thank you, Dr. Angie, for being on the Kim B. Davis Show. Now, before we get out of here, tell us all the things you have going on. Tell us where we can find you, how we can reach out to you.
Okay, thank you for asking. You can find me, Angela Celeste May, as it says down below. Dr. Angela Celeste May. You can find me on all of most of the major socials, on YouTube, Angela Celeste May, YouTube, my personal Facebook page, on Instagram, excuse me. For my the music side of what I do, you can go to Dr. Angela Celeste May on Facebook. I have a music page there. You can go to reverbnation.com/Angela Celeste May, see some of my music stuff. And also for my company, AMA and Associates Incorporated, where we do counseling, consulting, and coaching. You can go to AMAassociates.com. So that's our website. You can go to AMA on Instagram, and you can go to AMA also. We have a page on Facebook also. Those are some places where you can find me. Also, what else? I gave you the website. Some things I've got going on. I have my book, of course. There's Freedom. What is the experience of living without, with my bookmark? What is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? Purchase a copy for yourself. It's on Kindle as well as softback on Amazon and on xlibris.com. It's a wonderful book, if I do say so myself, about how to get unstuck, you know, going from feeling stuck in your life in some whatever way, in your relationships, in your career, self-esteem, and steps to getting unstuck. So there are 7 themes from that. You can also go to iTunes and Amazon.com for my album, Reintroducing the Lady. That's what it's called. And as far as what I'm doing right now, I am AMA and Associates Incorporated, my company with my sister Michelle May. We're in the pre-launch period right now for our annual my sister's annual retreat. It's a virtual retreat in January for creative professionals. So go to AMA on Facebook, and find out more information about that to sign up. And what else? Oh, musically, if you're in the Detroit area, the Violin Divas will be playing again for the first time since the pandemic. We'll be playing at Noel Night. So for those of you who don't know, Noel Night's a wonderful annual, many decades long annual celebration that we have right at the beginning of December. And it's wonderful. It's in the cultural center of, well, Detroit is a cultural center, but it's in the cultural center of Detroit. And we're all the, really major museums and libraries and everything are open for entertainment, and it's all family friendly. It's wonderful. All kinds of entertainment, music and good food and everything. So the Violin Divas is a string group that my recreational string group my sister put together many years ago. And I play violin and viola in the group. So we'll be performing the first Saturday in December. So check that out. You can go to the website for Noel Night to find out where we'll be playing. And I've got some performances coming up that are booked already for 2023, one in March and some more coming up. So I'll be sharing all of that. So that's some stuff that's going on at the moment.
Excellent. I'm so excited about the Violin Divas. I want to come and see you. That will be amazing. That will be amazing. Thank you, Dr. Angie. Oh, go ahead. You were going to say one other.
I was just going to say, we just found out which one of those venues at Noel Night where we'll be playing. Because I just forgot what it was. It's at the Scarab Club.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We are at the Scarab Club, and we requested an earlier time, so I think we're like 6:30, 6 o'clock
Okay.
or 6. Yeah.
Okay.
But for those of you who are in Detroit, or Metro Detroit, come down to the Scarab Club and everything else going on at for Noel night, the first Saturday in December.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Angie, for being on the Kim B. Davis Show. We can't wait for our next topic next month when you come back on. Thank you again for being one of our favorite guest hosts and always giving us good information. Thank you guys for tuning in. You can find me everywhere on social media, on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, everywhere. And it's Kimberly Batchelor Davis. Bachelor is spelled BATCHELOR. And you can see this show on youtube.com/Kimberly Batchelor Davis. Please click like and follow for more updates and to keep up with the show. You can also hear this show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and Wisdom. You can learn more about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you'll join us on our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.